ceremony for today.
All my relations. I would like to introduce Elder who will start us off in a good way. Everything that we do in this world has to be done with a connection to everything that we go, everything around us. And so I actually started off with all my relations, and that includes not only everyone who is here, but all of creation. So I ask Elder Melvin Swan, an Indigenous veteran, to come say a few words, a prayer.
Yes, good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm retired Corporal Swan, military policeman. I'm also from the Lake Manitoba First Nations, Treaty 2. I walk without a beach in the sacred First Nation pipe of Canada. I guess I want to say this prayer in my language right there on my... I forgot about the cell phone, sorry. Again, I'd like to say this prayer. I accept this tobacco today, this nice day, with the Creator in mind, and my grandfathers, my ancestors of Treaty 2, and namely my father, who basically left me the way I am in the Department of Culture and Heritage. Again, I say this prayer with this tobacco. I accept this tobacco in a good way and the nice days given to me, and wish everyone a good campaign here today. And I thought I was arriving at Wab Canoe's campaign, but that didn't work, so I'm stuck with Robert. Anyways, I know Wab personally, but we won't go into that. And so I'm going to say this prayer in my language. Hangishaban tu kinlak beno magizigak, and the sundani makogi ziskop mak. Waguitin wakiga na tekin and sundani mak. Gawete nung gumanagizigak masumsak. Nung gumagani boy yago din ay maganak chiminasek matisin na nakama oni jiga natamok nung manoni ganjini shati natamot no matisi goik cheese sek ego bawit kami ya goitin ya ke mama nana ke awegi zes wakinage gugap matak na nakundan should attack with a Mishumsa. Beneath standing is your descent Gizamantu. There's a one mesh nam Gizamantu. There's a one mesh nam Gizamantu. There's a one mesh nam Gizamantu. One mesh nam Gizamantu. Thank you. Miigwech. Have a nice day. One boy.
And where's John? Our fearless leaders.
Yeah.
So we'll sing a song to the four directions. This will ask our ancestors to come here to be with us and to represent, to ask them to support our leaders here of the party, our elected MLAs, who as they guide us to victory in our various ridings and encourage us to bring a vision for Manitoba. We sing to the four directions. We are gathered here on Treaty 1 territory, homeland of the Anishinaabe Nation, homeland of the Neho, Dene peoples. This is the homeland of all peoples who live here in Manitoba, and we all live here together. Hey, hey. Now, without further ado, my friends, let us introduce our good leader. Obviously, we already know that. But it is our good friend, and who has been a great friend of everyone here, who has been working very hard for many years to make a difference in Manitoba, who shows up with passion. And it's not always about taking the easy path, and we've talked about this before, but sometimes choosing the path which is difficult because it is the good way. It is the old warrior way, to count the coups, to make sure that you can stand on the hill and raise your fist high, to not take the easy route that so many other people want to do, and follow a political path or a political line which is far too often just simply thoughtless and without thought. But we know that Dougald, each and every day, with the encouragement of the other leaders, has also led us always in a good way and in a good place. So without further ado, the MLA for St. Boniface, the leader of the Manitoba Liberal Party, our good friend, Dougald Lamont. Hey!
Thank you so much, everybody. I was going to say, how do you do? How do you do? I'm not Wob Canoe. Sorry. Thank you very much, Elder, for your prayer, and thank you, Robert, for your words. Good morning, everyone. You know, it is really special to be standing right here in St. Boniface, which is really where it all began, and by which I mean our province. Because in August and September 1869, Louis Riel started by standing on the steps of the St. Boniface Cathedral, which is just a couple of blocks from here. And he warned that people were coming to Manitoba who weren't going to respect the rights of the people who lived here. Some of those people who've lived here since time immemorial. And Riel gathered together the Métis and the non-Métis, and he set out to establish the conditions on which Manitoba would become part of Canada. That we would have our own legislature, that we would have our own courts, that we would be able to speak French, that we would elect our own members of parliament to Ottawa, that we would have human rights, and that we would have treaties so we could live in peace with First Nations. You know, Manitoba really is an extraordinary place, and Riel was an extraordinary leader, and it is an awesome responsibility that I take very seriously to represent a constituency where the Indigenous founder of Manitoba and a father of Confederation is laid to rest, because the rights he fought for in 1869, in 1870, in 1885 are rights that we're still fighting for today. And I also know what it's like as a Manitoban to stand by and watch and see injustices happen right in front of us that people know about, and no one does anything. But I didn't take it lying down. I did something about it. I went into politics, and I ran for leader of the Manitoba Liberal Party, which was a challenge. I was running against 3 MLAs backed by 2 MPs, and I won, which wasn't easy. But working with Cindy and John since then has made me an immeasurably better person. I ran in St. Boniface in a seat that had been held by the former NDP Premier, Finance Minister and Leader, and I won twice. We recruited Willard Reeves to run in Fort White, which was a PC stronghold, and it is not anymore. We recruited Rhonda Nickel to run in Kirkfield Park, and we turned it into a 3-way race. This is a different election, and one thing about being Liberal is that for many years I think we've been defined by whatever our opponents choose to say about us. But my job as leader of the Manitoba Liberal Party is to define liberalism in Manitoba. I do take lots of input, but that is literally my job. It's why I wanted the job. It's why I worked so hard to get it. Yeah, I had to work harder than I thought I was actually capable of, and it has meant a lot of sacrifice on the part of my family, my wife, and my kids, and I'm deeply grateful for their patience and support. So I'm just going to talk a bit about what being a Manitoba Liberal means, because being a Liberal is fundamentally about respecting the freedom of every single human being, bearing in mind that every individual is also subject to the law. It means we always strive to see the humanity in everyone, what some people might call a soul or a spirit, in everyone, to see in other people that which makes us all the same. And collective rights matter too, but nothing matters so much as our fundamental shared humanity, that every living being has the right to certain human rights and dignities. And rights are about protections. It means there are certain things where people can't mess with you, where you get a fenced zone around certain of your rights as an individual. And one of those most important rights is the freedom to be able to speak truth to power without facing reprisal so that justice can be done. Bearing in mind it's truth to power, it's not just saying anything to power. So sometimes being a Liberal is making sure that people are protected and left unbothered. And sometimes it's about ensuring that people have that dignity. And that takes greater effort. That takes protecting and caring for people. And it also means making sure the law is just, and then the law is enforced, that justice is done and is seen to be done, because people need to be responsible and be held accountable. And that's our core. That's the stand we take on human rights and the law. It's the center of who we are. It's not at the edges. And it's not an economic ideology. It's about people. Because fundamentally the PCs and the NDP are parties about the economy. And they represent two vested interests who spend their time fighting about who gets to make money. And their attitude going into this election is the one they've been telling everyone for a while. We are told all the time that Manitoba Liberals, who are fiscally responsible, evidence-based, centrist, and progressive, that our political opinions have no place in government in Manitoba, just because the other parties say so. And I want to address the discussion about people talking about Manitoba Liberals possibly holding the balance of power, because no one can tell me that the PCs or the NDP deserve a majority government. I've said for a while the Manitoba NDP are actually pretty terrible socialists, but they've really taken it to the next level with their platform, which on issue after issue is exactly the same as the PCs, including the PC budget. The NDP are tough on crime. They're talking about subsidizing gas. They're going to take 8 years to end homelessness, 8 years to build ERs. Those are the NDP promises, not the PCs. And the reason the NDP can't and won't deliver the change Manitobans need, including their own supporters, is that Wab Kinew is saying he will keep the PC budget, including borrowing $453 million this year to send checks to billionaires. Manitoba NDP MLAs spent months railing about this injustice of this policy in the media and in the legislature. And now they've caved into it. The only difference between what the NDP and the PCs are doing, as far as these checks are concerned, is that the NDP's payments will be direct deposit. And I think what the Manitoba NDP is doing is actually harmful to progressive movements everywhere, Liberals included, because they're putting the NDP seal of approval on right-wing policies that just don't work. And they're doing it heading into a recession. Why is the NDP adopting PC policies? The same policies of Brian Pallister, Stephen Harper, Pierre Poilievre, and of course, Heather Stephenson. These are policies that undermine democratically elected governments. They're generally bad for people and the planet. Because the NDP at this point only care about getting re-elected. And all of that is what I came into politics to fight. Because we need to defend democracy, liberal democracy, and we need to defend liberal ideas and humane government policies. And we need to defend justice and evidence and facts and fairness, because the other parties have been defunding it. When I look at what other parties are offering, which is so out of touch with Manitobans' needs and their own principles, I don't understand it. I don't understand why you would run a campaign based on abandoning all the things that are supposed to be the most important to you. That's what the other parties have done again and again. It's what they're doing right now. And that's why I'm a Manitoba Liberal. And that is why we take the stands we do. We need to be clear about our real choices in the election. The NDP and PCs are both promising to keep the same conservative budget that borrows $453 million a year to send checks to billionaires and funds in Ontario. The NDP even said every voter would be talking about this as an election issue. Well, challenge accepted. Because we spoke up about those checks too, and we're keeping our word. We need to be realistic. We cannot afford what the PCs and NDP are both promising, which is more of the same bad policy. We will repeal 80% of those rebates, which will reduce the deficit by $360 million, restore stable and secure education funding, and substantially improve the province's finances. In our platform, we're also offering income tax cuts that are truly progressive by adjusting the basic personal exemption so that people over $300,000 won't have one, but people at the bottom end will have more. And yes, our platform document is about getting elected, but it's about much more than that. It's about how we will govern. We all know we need change in healthcare, in the cost of living, in justice, And I've never seen two party leaders treat their base with such contempt. There are two conservative parties in this election, the PCs and the NDP, and one fiscally responsible, progressive, liberal choice. So if you want to vote anybody but conservative in Manitoba, there's only one choice, and it's the Manitoba Liberal Party and our candidates. Okay, this is when I butter you all up. I'll get to it. Yeah. And we have incredible candidates, good people, caring people, and I will say tough people. And we're all doing this for the same reason, which is we believe in service. Many of us have served all of our lives in justice, in the military, in medicine, volunteering, working for others. And that idea of having made that contribution, of still reminding yourself that you have something to give, is a powerful motivator. And to anyone who says, well, I got a problem with Liberals, these are the only ones involved in this election. We are the Manitoba Liberal Party candidates. And when you vote for us, we're the ones who will represent you, nobody else. Talk to them, meet them, and you'll realize they'll do a great job as your MLA, no matter who or what your beliefs are. And because we have gone above and beyond when it comes to fighting for justice, other parties talk about voting their values. But really that means they only want to talk about and protect the people who have their values. That's not good enough. We'll stand up for everybody, whether we share your values or not. That's the point of being a liberal. That's what politicians are supposed to do. That's what liberals believe, and that's how government is supposed to work. And I know that's true for Cindy, for John, for myself, and it's sure as hell true of the rest of our candidates as well, because none of us do this alone. And I'll just say, John has addressed tremendous injustices in his time in office. Just for one, he got land returned to people in Hecla that was taken from them for decades. Cindy and I called for an outside review of Peter Nygaard's charges, resulting in being charged for an offense here in Winnipeg for the first time in 40 years. I personally prosecuted the Premier for conflict of interest for not declaring $33 million in real estate sales, and it was determined that she'd violated the law. And I have to ask any conscientious conservative in Canada, why is it that they have any business talking about being tough on crime? There's a 3,000 kilometer stretch of Canada from Alberta, Ontario, where every single conservative premier has been in legal hot water, including this one. At what point did this become acceptable in conservative Canada? So if it's considered controversial for me to talk about this, I have to ask why. Why is it? Because I am the first person to ever point it out. And I'll say again, people are suggesting that neither of these other two parties can form a majority government, and it's not because Manitobans can't make up their mind about who is better. This entire campaign on the part of the NDP and PCs is to paint each other as unfit to govern. We have 3 seats now. And I will point out that in 1969, Ed Schreier went from 3 seats to a majority government. John, Cindy, and I take nothing for granted. We're knocking on doors, and people are saying the balance of power is 6 seats. So, let's say Willard Reeves in Fort White, Rhonda Nickel in Kirkfield Park, Robert Falcon Willett in Southdale. But why, in heaven's name, would you stop there? Because there's candidate after candidate who is just incredible. We've got Gary Alejo in Burroughs, Eddie Callisto Tavares in Maples, Ian McIntyre in Kildonan and River East, Charles Warden in Assiniboia, Jean-Luc Boucher in Radisson, the most solid Labour guy you can imagine, Mark Branson in Tuxedo, Lauren Brawl in Borderland, Monica Guitry in La Vérendrye, Uche Nwanko in Waverley. Uche has a PhD and he speaks German. He's absolutely incredible. Michelle Badusky in Spruce Woods, Trenton Zaslick in Brandon West, Peter Bashens in St. Vital, Leamber Kensley in Riel. I am nowhere near done. Gerald Funk, who's lived in Point Douglas for 30 years, Neil Stewart in Lakeside, Alvina Rundle in Nepal, Kamisak, Cindy Friesen in Steinbach, Catherine Johnson in Fort Rouge, Nellie Manias in Kiewatinook, Sean James in Lake Gimli, Donovan DePista in Elmwood, Ernie Nathaniel in Fort Richmond, Shandy Strong in Fort Garry. There are more, but honestly, I'm running out of breath. But these are serious people. They know how to solve serious problems. They've shown they have the courage to stand up when it matters. And when I see our candidates, when I look at this platform, and I see the decades of experience helping people who are the best at what they do, whatever the PCs and NDP have been getting ready to do, getting ready for this election, we were putting together a government in waiting and a plan to deliver. A plan to rebuild healthcare by focusing on prevention, with a family doctor for every Manitoban to catch problems that can land you in hospital, or keep you out of an ER or an ambulance. We want to care for the people who provide care in our healthcare system. We're offering income tax that are progressive. We'll ensure stable education and provincial funding by repealing the PC NDP education rebates. We recognize that mental health care is health care by making it part of Medicare. We have a plan to invest in education so every student reaches their full potential, and a plan to build a stronger, more self-reliant Manitoba economy through entrepreneurship and innovation, and making sure seniors with people with disabilities are always able to live with dignity. We have a plan for real action that will make Manitoba a world leader in fighting climate change with a $300 million green plan. We'll invest in the arts, sports, and renewing facilities that have been neglected for decades. And we will reconcile with our Indigenous relatives and work together towards justice and healing. And finally, we'll make our democracy more open and accountable and more democratic, with ranked ballots and freeing Manitobans to speak without fear of intimidation, by reforming NDAs and bringing in legislation to stop people from being bullied into silence with anti-SLAPP lawsuits. The other parties are just giving you something to vote against. Manitoba Liberals are giving you something to vote for. More than just a leader, an entire team that has your back. We're offering a real choice for real change in this election. Thank you so much, and I'll take your questions.
We've had a brief chance to look over your platform.
Yep.
On the property tax front, say you repeal 80% of the rebates, and the other 20%, how would that be distributed?
Well, basically, it's basically on how much property people have. So the more property you have, the less likely you'll get a rebate. It's really about protecting people who are small landowners, seniors on fixed incomes, to make sure that, look, this is still a really tough time. I acknowledge that, and we also want to make sure, look, if there's we want to be flexible about it. If there's somebody out there who's facing tremendous hardship and aren't going to be able to handle it, we want to be able to say that there's room for discussions. But basically, it's about saying, so right now there are a whole bunch of commercial folks. We're sending checks to major companies outside of Manitoba, pipelines, railway companies. There's no reason at all that we should be borrowing money, and because that's it. It's not even a tax cut. This is just $453 million in borrowed money that has added up to over $1 billion in debt over the last 3 years that we've added to send huge checks to some of the largest companies and richest individuals in the world. So the entire idea behind it is to say, if you're a smaller landowner, if you're a senior on a fixed income, we'll be protecting you in terms of your rebates.
And again, we just had a brief chance to go over the platform, so maybe I've missed it. It seems like you have several $100 million of new promises and about $350 million of revenue from that property tax change. Is there another revenue change that's generating money for you? I don't see it adding up.
Oh, the progressive income tax will also, the way it'll work is that it'll actually be, we should actually be increasing some amount of income. We had to hire a company to write the software to determine what the exact breakdown of it will be. So we'll be releasing those. That's the one aspect of it that's missing, because we had to hire programmers. But that will be fully, that is the one thing that's missing from it that we'll be including shortly. But yeah, we actually anticipate that the income tax, it'll be reduced for people making $120,000 or less, and then for people over that, and certainly over $300,000, there'll be a modest increase. But that means that we'll be pulling in more money than the PC or the NDP.
Also, in today's platform that you released, can you state exactly how much new spending the Liberals are committing?
Well, look, it says $1.5 billion. That being said, well, hold on a second. It's $1.5 billion of spending. Not all of that would be new spending.
How
Some
much
of that
is new spending?
Yeah. So I would say I think 2/3 of it is. So it might be about $1 billion of new spending.
And is all of that annual? Because I noticed there are some one-time costs in there, like the return of the clawback on child benefits.
Well, look, and that's, so that as the example of that, that's a multi-year expenditure. There's a whole series of these things. Yeah, most of this is a 1-year expenditure. There are things that are 1-year expenditures, and then it would drop afterwards. So.
Just with respect to the property tax rebates, what is an example of a property value that would continue to receive a rebate, and what is the threshold for properties that would not continue to receive
We actually have to look at the numbers for that. Look, it's actually incredibly difficult for access to access those figures. So, but the basic rules to say the top 20, like the to look at the bottom 20% of people who are affected right now. So the top 80% would not receive rebates. So, and to be clear, the people who are in that bottom 20% tend not to be paying much in property tax anymore. So it's really about the fact that there are people, in terms of property ownership, the people at the top of the line, they're going to be people who own 500 times as much property as people at the bottom. So it has to do with the levels of concentration of income. I'll end up lecturing you and boring you about all of this. I have some charts, but no, it's an enormous. But one of these things is to recognize the fact that we actually have a massive concentration of income and property ownership, and that we need to focus on saying that's actually where the money is, and that's actually the people who have an enormous amount of surplus money as well, and it's not benefiting our economy by giving them massive tax cuts.
So if you're promising $1 billion in new spending and bringing in about $400 million in revenue, that sounds like an extra $600 million on the deficit, at least the first year.
The one thing I have to say it's not as accurate. It's not as close as that, because some of this has to be integrated with part of what we would do is we've called for a new budget. So we're not planning on operating from the PC budget. So in some cases you'd be saying, well, we're not going to spend money on X, Y, and Z. There are programs that the PCs are running that we're not interested in doing. But the other thing I really have to emphasize, there's two things about it. We need to rebuild after the pandemic. It's absolutely critical. And there's lots of folks who want to. The fact that the PCs and the NDP are not, or the NDP are promising what looks like austerity after a pandemic, as we're heading into a recession, when we desperately need to rebuild our services, we have to spend this money now, because our justice system and our crime is a shambles, our healthcare system is a shambles. We have massive, and this is actually incredibly critical, because. And I'll address part of what the NDP did wrong with their health platform. We are 400 doctors short. There are another 300 doctors who could be retiring in the next 5 years. That puts us 700 doctors short. We need to put money into training people up and making sure we have doctors and nurses so we have a functioning healthcare system 4 years from now.
Yeah.
And that's not going to happen. And the same is also true of infrastructure, where we have infrastructure that's rotten across the province because there's been 7 years where nothing has been done, where we have to put that money in so that people can actually make more money. So this is about, one thing if you're running a deficit, as the PCs have done, where they've borrowed $1 billion to send checks, millions of dollars worth of checks out of Manitoba. This is all about reinvesting in Manitoba, genuine investments that are going to improve our healthcare system and reduce crisis costs. And that is the one thing, when you look at Manitoba, and why our systems are in crisis, it's because we have so many people who've been horribly mistreated, quite honestly, by the NDP and the PCs. And once we actually start to treat those people better, we reduce the costs. When you bring people in from homelessness and put a roof over their house, they cost less money. When you make sure that people aren't getting amputations or going blind from diabetes, they cost less money. When you actually invest in businesses, or you actually invest in roads and bridges so that farmers don't have to drive their trucks half empty, it saves money in gas and everything. These are all, we are living in a province where the Association of Manitoba Municipalities basically said they don't know how they're going to pay for anything. They don't know how they're going to pay for their bridges, their justice, their healthcare. They're asking for a government. And our position is that this is a critical time to invest. It's the most important time to invest and rebuild after the pandemic.
If I have a house of the average value, in the price of 350 now, with the way prices are going up.
Yeah.
If I have a house with the average value of 350,000, would I pay more property tax?
No.
It sounds like I'd be in the 80%.
No, this is the thing. You wouldn't pay any. We're already all paying the property tax.
I would get less rebate.
You just you would just get a less rebate.
At a $350,000 property. Are you talking about 80% of properties, or are you talking about 80% of the property, the highest value?
So if you were gonna take the total, let's just say 80% of all property. That's the way of thinking about it. So if you just talk about 80% of all property, and the fact is that 80% of all property tends to be owned by the top 20%. So there's the number of people who like there are, it is a very difficult thing to wrap your head around the degree to which income and inequality and wealth concentration is completely out of proportion to the way we think it is. So you can actually, so even if we were to, because the other reality is many Manitobans don't own any property at all. So this is about people who own enormous amounts of property, who would affect property developers. But the other thing about it, actually, it just cannot be justified in my mind, because we're borrowing money when we don't have it. We've added $1 billion worth of debt and deficit with no measurable and noticeable benefit on our province.
Just to put a fine point on Steve's question, a property valued at $350,000 would not receive an education property tax rebate.
We'd have to run the numbers on it, but the bulk of the property is not paid for, is not actually residential. The bulk of the property is lots of it is commercial and other properties. So, like, an example would be Polo Park, which was owned by kind of like Fairview, which got $1 million, and other and major. It's really the people who would be hard, who are getting the biggest breaks, are commercial properties and not residential under the current plan, and luxury properties. So this is really about, if you own 5 properties, you get a colossal amount of money. And just as an example, there was one example, I think CBC wrote about it, but there were people. There was a condo in Point Douglas where people got a $7 check, and there was a condo in Tuxedo where they got $6,000. So that's the difference that we're talking about.
So how would a person who owns a $350,000 property be affected if this policy were written?
They would be, well, there's 2 ways. One is that they would just keep paying their taxes the way they continually are. Next year they would not get a rebate check unless they qualify.
On the green fund.
Yes.
Promised to set up a green fund with the rising price on carbon. Do I understand correctly that your plan would not increase the rebates instead the government would keep some of the money for a green project?
Yeah, that's correct. So the whole point of it is to say, as many people have urged, is to actually have Manitoba come back and take control of its own green policy. That way we can make, if we need to, we've talked about breaks for farmers in urgent areas so that we can actually renegotiate the carbon tax for them. But yes, the idea is to actually put this so that instead of it just being flowed back to people, it'll be used directly to fighting climate change and to helping people pay to reduce their costs. So right now people get a check, and now they'd be able to apply for a fund which would allow them to get energy retrofits and other ingredients, so that they can actually save and lower their energy costs permanently.
You're the first one out with a fully costed platform.
Yeah.
There's areas obviously where people are going to be paying some more tax. Obviously you feel that you're separating yourself from your opponents by saying, we got to spend, we got to get out of the pandemic,
yeah.
We've got to rebuild things, and people have to pay.
Yes. No, absolutely. I think, but what's happened over the last year is, and the PCs and NDP are both doing this. The Manitoba government's own books, the finance department of Manitoba said, we are too reliant on federal transfers. We are at a point where we are already in danger, if another government were to be elected. We would be at the mercy of that government, because so much of what we rely on is federal transfers. We've had, and the increases in federal transfers we've had have been enormous. We have $1 billion in the last year, increase just last year, 100% increase since 2016. It was 3.5 billion in 2016, now it's over 7. So, and what's happened, instead of that money going to services, infrastructure, health, justice, or crime, it's gone into boondoggles and tax cuts. And so it's absolutely mind-blowing to me. This is the least fiscally responsible government that I've ever seen, I think. And I don't know how people anyone who calls themselves a fiscal conservative can defend this, but to me it just shows being fiscal conservative has nothing to do with being fiscally responsible. We're fiscally responsible.
J'aurais une question en français, vous pouvez répondre en anglais aussi.
Non, non, je l'ai en français, j'ai attendu, mais oui, on va avoir toute la plateforme, on va la traduire en complet, et oui, on a des promesses pour le français aussi.
J'aurais une question plus par rapport au coût de la vie. Vous proposez des solutions plutôt sur le long terme, des investissements long terme qui semblent impliquer que les citoyens doivent se serrer la ceinture pour quelques années. Avez-vous des mesures concrètes pour aider les gens à faire face au coût de la vie maintenant?
Oui, non, on n'attend pas. Ce qu'on a dit, c'est qu'on va agir immédiatement. Un des changements les plus importants, c'est les impôts personnels. De réduire les impôts personnels, ce serait assez grand pour tout le monde, pour à peu près 80% de tous les Manitobans. Alors, ça, c'est quelque chose, on va agir immédiatement pour changer les impôts personnels. Et l'autre chose, c'est d'avoir, et non seulement ça, on a on a le Mincom pour les aînés, on a le Mincom pour les gens handicapés, pour deux exemples, mais on propose aussi des nouveaux outils pour aider les gens avec leurs dettes. Les entreprises, les agriculteurs, ainsi que les gens au niveau personnel, ce sont des nouveaux outils parce qu'il y a des endroits où gratuitement on peut aider des gens avec les dettes. Et ça, pour moi, c'est la chose la plus importante, de ne pas... Les coûts qui sont les plus difficiles pour les Manitobans ne sont pas toujours les coûts du gouvernement, ce sont les coûts privés. Alors, il faut aider les gens avec ça, mais on a plusieurs... ce n'est pas une question d'attendre, mais aussi c'est d'investir pour payer les gens qui travaillent dans le système de santé. Non, il y a plusieurs endroits où on n'attend pas du tout. Je pense que c'est plutôt les autres partis qui sont en train de dire qu'ils vont attendre quelques années. Et surtout, pour les sans-abri, d'avoir des investissements pour assurer que les gens ont un abri le jour même. Ça, c'est un grand changement. Alors, et toutes ces choses sont pour améliorer, pour changer les choses où les autres partis attendent.
I also have a question on housing. There is a coalition proposing 5 pillars today
Oui.
In order to fight the housing crisis.
Oui, oui.
Do you intend to adopt these pillars? It's a question they're asking to all parties in this presidential election. So if you'd answer in English and in French.
Oui. We met with them last week and they were already in the platform. So yes, we will support them, and that's one of the things that's committing to $10,000, 10,000 new units in housing, 1,000 units a year over the next 10 years. That was something, we announced that as part of our housing plan already. And again, when it comes to homelessness, I don't know what the PCs have, for the most part, invested in building new shelter spaces, which means more mats on floors. And the NDP are promising to end homelessness 8 years from now. And we said that's completely unacceptable. We have to do more because we can and should be housing people the same day. That's our goal. It'll take 2 years from now to build it, and it doesn't mean we won't house anybody in between. But right now, that is incredibly urgent, and we've talked with folks who are worried because there've never been this many homeless people that they've seen. I've ever seen in Manitoba, and winter is coming, and it's pretty harsh. So. Yeah, absolutely. Really, what we're talking about, I'll say, if you talk about the long-term changes that have got to take place, it takes a while to move a system towards prevention. But the fact that it takes a while has been an excuse to never do it. So over and over, people have said, well, we should do this, but everyone says, well, it takes so long, so we've never done it. And this is the time to start moving on these issues immediately. Because there's crisis after crisis. There really is. This is an incredibly important election where entire systems are in crisis, and I'm very proud we put together a plan to actually address those crises. And we talked to people who, and the one thing I can say is that anyone who's worried about it being a liberal plan, we talk to people who know what they're talking about. So I'm confident that this plan will work because that's what the people who know what they're talking about told us it will. Oh wait, est-ce qu'il en français aussi? OK. Et,
Peut-être plus la dernière partie.
OK, oui. Et seulement pour dire, oui, on va agir pour avec l'abri et les 5 piliers. C'est correct. Avec les 5 piliers pour l'abri, oui, c'est déjà dans notre plateforme. On a une promesse de 10 000 nouveaux espaces en 10 ans.
At the beginning of your remarks, you spoke about a minority, the potential for a minority government, and Liberals potentially holding a balance of power. Why is that something that you think Manitobans will find appealing? Why should Manitobans want a minority government?
Look, when you have two parties say that they're the only ones who can beat each other, what are they beating each other? It's not being good. and I think a lot of people are they're looking, if you look at, there are people who have a lot of reservations and concerns about both the other leaders and both the other parties. They're offering something to vote against. And we're offering something to vote for. And I think that's what's really important. And if you look at our candidates and our plans, I'll just step back for a moment. How is democracy supposed to work in Manitoba? It's supposed to be based on candidates, platforms, debates, ideas. It'd be nice to have an election where that actually happens. And I think we can win.
Peut-être juste une dernière question en français sur la taxe, sur votre plan de politique verte. Est-ce que vous comptez instaurer une nouvelle taxe carbone au Manitoba ou on fait expliquer un peu votre plan là?
Non, mais alors ce qui s'est passé, c'est qu'au Manitoba, les conservateurs et Heather Stephenson ont proposé une taxe carbone. Il a enlevé une taxe carbone. Ensuite, il a commencé à se battre avec le gouvernement fédéral. Ils ont allé jusqu'au Cour suprême, ils ont perdu. Alors, ce que c'est, parce que le gouvernement du Manitoba a refusé de participer, de collaborer, le gouvernement fédéral a dit, voici votre taxe. C'est notre taxe. Mais alors, ce qu'on propose, c'est de dire, on va prendre contrôle de tout ça, on va négocier pour que le gouvernement du Manitoba ait à la contrôle. On peut avoir nos propres changements, de dire, ça va appliquer ici et non pas ici. Mais l'autre chose qui est tellement importante, c'est qu'on va contrôler l'argent. C'est notre argent et on peut dire où ça va être dépensé. Et maintenant, on n'a aucun contrôle du tout, c'est tout au fédéral. Alors c'est vraiment pour prendre contrôle et de dire c'est exactement la même taxe, ça ne change rien, ça va être chargé de la même façon, mais la différence c'est que le Manitoba va être en contrôle. Hey! Merci.
J'ai peut-être juste une dernière question. Je comprends que les chèques qui viennent du fédéral pour la taxe carbone seraient éliminés, seraient redirigés ailleurs. On enlèverait le tax property rebate. Est-ce que vos changements au niveau d'imposition vont venir compenser les gens à ces chèques qu'ils ne recevront plus?
Bien, ça va être... Non, on va... parce que c'est 300 millions de dollars chaque année. Le taxe carbone va continuer. On va continuer, il y va encore un peu de chèques, mais la chose qui est importante, c'est que les gens auront l'opportunité d'épargner, de sauver d'argent, parce qu'il y aura un fonds vert où ils peuvent recevoir des rebates pour payer, pour renouveler leur maison, pour l'isolation. Alors, la différence, c'est qu'on va investir pour que les gens peuvent payer moins pour l'énergie. Et ça, parce que maintenant, on reçoit l'argent, on retourne l'argent. Ce qu'on va faire avec le fonds vert, c'est de créer un programme où n'importe qui peut appliquer pour qu'il sauve l'argent. OK? All right. There we go. And that's it. There we go. There's the platform. All right. Thank you so much. I see Steve looking at his watch from. So come on, let's wrap this up. We'll wrap it up. Oh, okay.